Good morning. My name is Kevin Hilton, the owner and gunsmith for 6H Tactical. Today we're going to go over this Traditions muzzleloader build that was completed for Sonoran Desert Institute Muzzleloader Lab. The Sonoran Desert Institute for this class sends you a kit, Traditions kit, which the barrel is in the white, the wood is unfinished, and about 90% inlet. Although it's 90% inlet, you still have about 90% of the inletting to do yourself. With this kit, as I said, it comes in the white. So as you see here, this barrel is now browned. The barrel is browned to try to match a technique used in the 18th and 19th centuries. Bluing was around. Browning was just another type of finish. The back of the muzzle loader, on the end of your stock here, you have your brass butt plate. These have to be fit to each individual rifle as you build it. So once you put it on here, you will actually rasp and file the wood and sand the wood until it meets the metal itself. When it meets the metal, you're still actually going to file the metal with the wood, and that gives you that nice tight seam. Before you start your build, and after you inventory everything that comes in the kit, you need to dry fit and rough fit all of your metal parts first. Like I said, it comes 90% inlet already. However, the lock might not necessarily fit into the channel where the lock is supposed to go. So what you would do with that is place the lock. If it doesn't go in, and keep in mind, it shouldn't be loose where it just drops in. You would still like it to be a little snug. You'll remove the lock, and you can apply to the metal surface inletting black or Prussian blue, some sort of marking compound that does not dry. Once you apply it to the lock, you place the lock back on the metal, on the wood, and then you lightly tap it. Remove the lock, and any parts where you see the black or Prussian blue, whatever compound you use, is a high spot. That high spot needs to be removed using either gouges, chisels, files. For example, here's a couple woodworking tools that we would use on this, couple gouges and chisels. You have to be careful not to remove an excessive amount of wood. You can always take away. It is more difficult and doesn't look as neat and clean if you have to add material again. And we will discuss that later on in this video. So moving on, after your lock is now fit to the stock, you're going to work on fitting the barrel. Now, I noticed when the kit came that this tang on the back of the barrel was straight. So when you placed it into the stock, it actually went straight out the back and did not follow the curvature of the stock. So with that said, we took the we took the barrel over here to this small anvil. Using the horn of the anvil, lightly tapped it with a 2.5 pound hammer to bend the curvature to meet the curvature of the stock. Once that was complete, and we knew it fit in here, touching the bottom of the wood and seating up here, we then removed the barrel, hung the barrel up, and proceeded to brown it. There's many different solutions out there. They have a Birchwood Casey Plum Brown, which requires you to heat the barrel to 275 degrees and apply it evenly. That's a little difficult to do if you're just using a torch and you don't have an oven you can put it in. Trust me, your wife does not necessarily like it when you stick gun parts in an oven. I do it all the time. I get chewed out all the time. So, with that said, there's a company in Indiana, and they're called Laurel Mountain Forge. Laurel Mountain Forge makes traditional, if you would, stains, finishes for muzzleloading firearms and other firearms. They have what they call a barrel brown and degreaser. This actually doesn't require you to prep the metal as much as, say, the Birchwood Casey, because all you have to do is just wipe it on. You don't even have to degrease the barrel. It pulls the grease out. You put this on a nice even coats, and then it will brown the barrel the way it needs to be browned. Now if you want to zoom in here and look a little bit, you can see that there are some uneven marks on the barrel. That was done on purpose using steel wool afterwards to give it more of a worn look. Browning process is taking place, which can take as long as you want it to. You know, how dark of a color you want, how light of a color you want. This barrel browned for approximately a week. Give or take, you know, a couple pauses here and there, because during the browning process it'll acquire a fuzzy orange rust haze over the barrel, which needs to be carted off. They tell you to use baking soda and hot water to stop the rusting process. However, that doesn't necessarily work 100% all the time. So even though the barrel was completed with the browning process and saturated with oil to stop any more rust, we still had to tend to it every day while I was working on other gunsmithing activities to make sure that no new rust was forming. Once I knew that it wasn't getting any haze on it, or you couldn't wipe off any more loose rust, then I knew it was good to be able to complete the rifle with. Once the browning was done, the sights were drifted in, and same with the underlugs, which hold the barrel to the fore end. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, and I don't know if you can see it, you might be able to, you might not. The front sight is drifted in. However, when it came with the kit, you could just push the sight in all the way, side to side, with your hand. A sight should be drifted in from right to left, drifted out left to right. The sight should only go in about halfway before it hits resistance. That way you know you have a snug fit. If you can see right here, underneath the sight, right there, there's a little piece of shim stock. So I had to use shim stock that was about 5/1000ths of an inch thick to fill the void underneath the front sight so it would slide in and not come out. Right now this rifle has about 15-20 shots through it. The sight has not moved. The way you would do this, if anybody runs into this problem down the road, is you can lay your sight on top of the shim stock and cut out the shim stock for the exact dimensions of the base of your sight. You can use red Loctite and you can Loctite that in to the dovetail, or you can do like I did, because I wasn't quite sure if that was going to be tight enough yet, and put it on the bottom of the front sight and drift it in as one. So it's not red Loctited, it's holding. Again, there's been about 15 to 20 shots through here already with 90 grains of 2F powder and a patched 490 round ball, and the sight has not moved at all yet. The next step that I came to was to stain the wood. Now, if you notice, this wood has more of a red undertone. It's a little lighter looking than the stocks you see nowadays, and even on muzzleloaders. The most common wood used is black walnut or maple. This stock, if I remember correctly reading the packaging, was a maple stock. It was white. There was no dark color to it like you would see in a walnut. Oh. Like this is a walnut stock blank. You can see how it's dark. This was pure white when we started. So again, trying to keep with historical accuracy to an extent, I also purchased from Laurel Mountain Forge their antique wood stain in Lancaster maple. This company looks at rifles from the 18th and 19th century and matches their stains to match the colors used on rifles and muskets and shotguns from the 18th and 19th century. Therefore, I chose that Lancaster maple to match the color, and as you can see, it brought the grain out nicely in the buttstock. While, and you can see it's not 100% polished now because I have been shooting it, while the stain is setting in and drying, I began polishing all the brass pieces and the guide rod pieces to go on. So they will have a nice smooth fit and have a nice high luster and really show off the aspects of the firearm. If you notice, the ramrod is a different color. The ramrod was dyed using walnut stain and only has a couple coats of true oil on it, as I didn't want the ramrod to be a high luster, but I did want the contrast between both. Once the stain was dry, then a oil finish was applied. I have seen people, and I have had rifles and guns come into the shop where people just think, once I stain a piece of wood, I'm going to spray it with some clear coat that I get in a rattle can at Home Depot. That's not the case. If you want a quality stock, you need to use a quality oil like linseed oil, true oil, which is what was used on here, which is an oil finish. The wood absorbs the oil, which helps with the waterproofing, and then as it dries, you'll see the luster go away. So there were about 7 coats of oil applied to this to bring out the luster that was wanted. Now, if I can back up for a minute, I did fail to mention, when finishing the wood, they say it's a good rule of thumb to finish up to about 400 grit sandpaper to get a nice smooth finish. This stock was finished up to 2000 grit sandpaper. The finer the grit, the finer voids in the fibers you'll have. It'll also use some of the sawdust, will fill in some of the voids. The stock was not wiped off with a damp cloth prior to staining, but only just dusted off to leave some of that particles inside the wood to fill in any gaps and voids. Now, again, to back up, because I did miss a step here, the barrel tenons have to be drilled through the stock to hold in place the barrel onto the fore end. This has to be a precise measurement because you're only using a number 32 pin to hold these in place. If you're off, it's going to look bad. Now, if you notice down here, I inlet a hunter star on either side of this stock. Now, yes, it's a nice, decorative piece. However, if you notice, there's a hole drilled into it. Well, that's because while drilling the stock in this area, the stock pushed out on one side, which made it look sloppy and uneven. So I decided at that point I would use a hunter star on either side of that tenon pinhole to remove any marks or any areas that might have not been done correctly or blemished. So the stars were inlet, which you'll see pictures of that later on in the presentation, to show how the stars were inlet, and then they were attached in there using epoxy, the holes drilled, and the pins put back through. If you notice when it was close up on here, you can't really see the pins on either side. I noticed the pins in this kit are small and aren't quite long enough. So I did order some number 32 drill rod from Brownells, which happens to be on back order. They have every other size but 32, which I will then make my own pins with. I will get this drill stock, I will temper it the way I need to temper it, cut it to the length so it reaches both sides evenly, and then blue it. So you don't have raw metal in there. Once everything is put together and your rifle is complete, you can do a functions check. Now, granted, you should be checking the lock and everything as you go, but for me, I don't see a point in doing the functions check until you're ready. The lock is its own piece. You can fine-tune it down the road. With a functions check, there should be a half cock, which, when you pull the trigger, it will not drop off of half cock. And your full cock, there should be a nice pronounced click in each one, and while you're looking on the inside, if you look on the inside of the plate, it should be seated in its respective notch on the sear. Now, you want to make sure it fires. You do not want to dry fire this. Now, I know, with modern firearms, they say, yes, you can dry fire them, it's not going to hurt, and that's correct. It's not going to hurt them. I mean, in the Army, we must have dry fired our weapons hundreds of times before they even put us on the range when I was at basic training. It's not going to hurt it. However, with this, you do not want to dry fire on top of this nipple. All right, this nipple holds a number 11 cap, and granted, you can get more. I have another number 11. I even have one for a musket cap, but it can deform it and mess up the nipple, and you don't want to do that. So by keeping your pressure on it, just if you're going to decock, you want to pull the trigger and make sure it goes down nicely. Now you know that your rifle is functioning the way it should. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email me at kevin@6htactical.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about this muzzleloader build. You'll see in the later video a test fire showing the proper function of this muzzleloader, which is dead on accurate at 50 yards at this time. Thank you, and have a lovely day.